Todd Howard truly is the gift that keeps giving. Sure, he's played a part in many well-regarded, genre-defining games, but he's also just so darn funny, sporting a reality distortion field that's been memed on for years. Well, he's just opened up about Fallout 76, even hinting about their future desires for other franchises. And that might mean one thing only: live services. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another industry report. Yes, it's another Bethesda-related video. I did not plan on getting a second one out so soon, but this one is reasonably important. IGN released an 8-minute segment of their long interview with Todd Howard. The segment covers the launch of Fallout 76, plus quite a bit more, and suffice to say, I think it's rather revealing, especially once you analyze the very interesting manner in which Todd Howard speaks.
We knew we were going to have a lot of bumps. That's a difficult development. A lot of new systems and things like that. Hey, we're going to go try this new thing. And anytime you're going to do something new like that, you know you're going to have your bumps. You know that a lot of people might say, that's not the game we want from you, but we still want to be somebody who's trying new things. And that was a very difficult development on that game to get it where it was. And we were ready for, you know, a lot of those difficulties ended up on the screen, and we knew, hey, look, this is not the type of game that people are used to from us, and we're going to get some criticism on it, and a lot of that very well-deserved criticism.
When asked about the launch of 76, he said there was always going to be bumps. Anytime that you are going to do something new, you're going to have your bumps. It's an odd way of underplaying just about everything. I mean, from the consumer's perspective, these weren't bumps, these were far larger. He went on to say that Fallout 76 isn't the type of game that everyone would have wanted from them, but that they still are a team that wants to try new things. And again, I feel like that's a very interesting way of putting it. Many players would wonder why 76 exists, and when you look at everything surrounding that game, it does seem more driven by business model than by creativity. Of course, given all we know about how they've ran the game, including their absurdly expensive cash shop and their new time saver microtransactions. Now, Todd Howard did admit in the interview that many of their bumps made it on screen, and he said that a lot of the criticisms that they did receive were well deserved. So it is important to recognize that he did say that, and that absolutely is true, but when you move on, things continue to get more strange.
But we knew that going into this. We knew it's not that, right?
Yeah.
You would say, look, this isn't a game, even from the beginning, this is not going to be like, you know, high Metacritic game. That's not what this is, given what it is.
So he went on to say that it's not a game, even from the beginning, that was ever going to have a high Metacritic score. He said, that's not what this is, given what it is. And that just sounds like sheer delusion to me. Not all online games are destined to be rubbish off the mark, yet he's sort of treating it as if it's just fated to be. Does he actually believe that? Well, it's hard to tell, but I do think he's trying to lessen their own culpability in their failure by, in this interview, continually talking about how it is almost just fate, right, given the type of game that it is. And I don't think that's true. No one sets out to create a low Metacritic game. To me, when he's trying to explain these things, it sounds a lot closer to Skeletor gloating about how it was always his plan to be defeated, and that He-Man and co have really just played into it all.
But we felt strongly this is a game we want to play, this is something we really want to do, and all of the games like this, whether it's us or somebody else, you can go back and look at them, there's a period once you launch. It's not how you launch, it's what it becomes, and you know, can't be prouder of the team that's worked on it. They've worked tirelessly, and it's really turned around. It's a fabulous game and an incredible community around it.
This continues with him talking about how 76 exists because it's a game that they wanted to play and that the problems that it faced just come with the territory. And he finished by talking about how the game is fabulous with an incredible community. And again, that just sounds like he's in the reality distortion field, but it's also possible that it's just a matter of perspective, where, you know, we as the people who naturally were chased away by the game, well, naturally we just wouldn't see the community that is there, if it is there. But still, it just does seem a little bit odd and out of touch from him, and more on that later.
Over the course of your career, have you been a guy that's read reviews?
Oh yeah.
Yeah?
I read them all.
So you got to read the good and the bad ones,
Absolutely.
right?
I read all the comments, and Look, I've experienced it all, right? We've had the games that hit the high 90s and win all the games of the years, and we have the ones that don't as well, and that kind of comes with the territory. I think it's part of the job to read all of that, and whereas I don't always like the grammar or adjectives they use, I think the intent is always, even like a very mean-spirited comment from a fan, I think the intent behind that is actually well-meaning.
Yeah, there can
like
be a
they
kernel
they
of...
love these games.
Yeah.
And they're super important to them. And they're important to us. So I think you have to dig into that and say, okay, where could we have done better?
Now, when asked about reading reviews and stuff like that, he said that he does. He said he reads them all, and that even the less polite ones he thinks do still come from a good place, and they are a representation of how much people actually care about their games. And that is totally fair. That is totally true, in my view. And he's totally on the money there.
Well, the main takeaway we had was you got to let it bake with a large live audience for longer than we did. There's just certain things you can never see until it's running 24/7 for a number of months. So, if there's one thing that we could have, I think I would have done differently, is find a way to let at scale people be playing the game 24/7 before you say, everybody in, here you go, pay us.
So if for instance, if maybe you wish you'd launched that into Steam Early Access, or Xbox Game Preview, and
or something like that, or okay, you're a Fallout 4 player, we're going to let you in the beta for free for this period of time.
Yeah.
Things like that that I think would have made a world of difference in how the game hit on day one. But it still probably would have had some issues, but we would have had a better look at what they were.
He said that the largest lesson they learnt was the need for more testing in a live environment. So essentially some form of extended beta that would have lasted for months, with him giving the example of just, say, giving access to Fallout 4 players. Again, that's on the money. That, he did say that there still would have been problems even with that, and sure, fair enough, but that they would have been a lot more prepared. And again, that is totally fair.
Do you think 76 has had any lasting sort of damage to Bethesda's reputation or Fallout's reputation?
I'm sure it's had some. It would be naive to say it's had zero, right? But I think if people come to the game now and see what's going on there, I think they'll be surprised. I'm really, really proud of what everybody's done in the game, and because I know where it's going, I think we're definitely long-term believers in what's going to be happening with that game, but more so us engaging with the people who play our games every day.
And overall, he said that essentially they are long-term committed to Fallout 76. He said that people would be surprised by how good the game is now, and that knowing where it's going, that he is a long-term believer, as is the team. And that's all fine for him to say, but I can't help but feel that, again, it just sounds like he's a little bit in the reality distortion field. He sounds a little bit deluded over the current quality of the game. Now, look, I'm actually willing to take him up on his offer, though. I'm willing to put 10 hours into that game, as it is right now, and to report my findings to you. So if you would like to see that, let me know. Next, though, we've got the part that worries me, especially given the recent Bethesda video that I made, and rather than just say the lines, I'm going to let the man himself say them.
With the people who play our games every day. And so it was partly that for me, which is if you look at a Skyrim and Fallout 4, those things, the amount of people that play those games still is... I mean, you can look it up on this. It's staggering.
Yeah.
Millions and millions of people every month playing those games, and we have no touch point with them. Right? It's just like, we ship the game, we do some mod stuff, but here you go. And so 76 was also, we need to learn how to be engaging and being able to update and see what players are doing and like be more engaged in that experience than zero. Right, so.
Now on the surface, you hear that and it does sound fine. But the second you actually think about it, that's where it gets a little bit worrying. He talks about not having a touching point with the game's community, and that with 76, it's all about them being more engaged with the community, updating their game more, doing all that. Does that sound good? I mean, yeah, at first it does, right, doesn't it? But when you actually look at how that's translated into reality, it's just a massive euphemism for live service. The real touching point that they want is with your wallet, as evidenced by how Fallout 76 has its absurdly expensive cash shop, now complete with time-saver microtransactions, and even more seemingly being in the future, with them saying that they wanted to bring more convenience, time-savery things to the game, perhaps through the Atomic Store. That's literally what they've said their intent is. Now, what Todd is selling here sounds great, but it's when we actually look into what that means that we kind of realize it's not good. Even going through Todd's own logic in this interview, I mean, it apparently also means live service, so bad critical reception, because apparently that's just not the type of game that does well in Metacritic. It's all so strange, right? And he does just seem borderline delusional from an outsider's perspective. And I suppose that's just why I decided to write this video and talk about it. It just seems so strange to me. The actual stuff that he's saying here sometimes just comes off as borderline delusional. I think especially with his delivery as well. And to be honest, it does sometimes come off as being pretty disrespectful of the fact that they did actually charge people money for 76, knowing that it was an utter mess. Yet, if you listen to the interview and you turn your brain off, you don't think about what he's saying critically, it all just sort of sounds good. And that's the thing with Todd's communications. He just has that Steve Jobs-like reality distortion field going on. You know, you hear Todd talk, and you can just feel the gravity of it all pull you in. Yet, if you were to actually believe everything in this video, well, you'd think that Fallout 76 wasn't really bad because of Bethesda. It was just bad because it's that type of game. It just wasn't a Metacritic game. It's just a different type of game. That all online games have their bumps, and that this one is no different. That a live service is actually a platform for continued community engagement, and that it's all great. And you know what? There we are. We're all happily skipping along with Todd in this alternate universe where everything that he says is 100% true and well-intentioned. And that really is the thing with the communication here. It just seems a little bit out of touch with reality, and it just doesn't seem to respect the customers that much. Plus, there's this seeming foreshadowing of the live service aspects for the future games. Even those that are a bit more Skyrim or Fallout 4-like in their structure. That, again, is a little bit worrying to me. Now, bring this all back down to earth, because I do think it's very important to be fair to Todd here. I think the actual explanation is pretty simple. I think most of it actually happens because Todd just has a different set of incentives and a different perspective. His problem is less that the game sucked when he sat down to play it. His problem is going to be more that he's dealing with lower player numbers than expected. Maybe a graph of player numbers that doesn't look good. He's going to be dealing with a team that's stuck with loads of bug reports and a host of PR problems. So from his perspective, well, the negative attention will have died down. His team will have been slowly delivering that content. The game actually is in a better state from everything that I hear. So from his point of view, everything will have been a bit of a win, even though from a customer's perspective, well, they got burned hard being sold a full-price game from who they perceive to be a bit of a snake oil salesman, and they're a bit distrustful. It's kind of interesting. Todd, by virtue of his position, he's going to have a more high-level view of the situation, like a chessboard, and I think it will mean that it's just a bit harder for him to empathize, that he might get a little bit out of touch. I mean, yes, this interview could be his attempt to be a big-brain, seven-dimensional being whose plan was to fail all along. Or it could just be a reflection of the entirely different position that he is in as compared to us, and the different set of incentives and just the different structure that he's working under. Now, none of this is to excuse him hyping things beyond reason, or to say that they were right to charge a full price for that game, or, to charge a full price for what a game could be in a year. And indeed, I think at this stage, he's just so experienced presenting games that he probably just does slip into, it's now me, studio director, Todd salesman mode, away we go. And that's probably just a normal thing for him. Now, I am not saying anything like this to excuse them. And in a way, what I'm saying here is almost more grim, because it seems like a lot of these communications are the way that they are almost systematically. They're just a product of the way that things are, meaning that in some ways, by default, we can't really be that trusting, given all that we've seen, and that, given that we've been burned in the past, the only safe thing to do is to be a bit distrustful by default, which is really sad to say. Though to break it down to the bare essentials, they knew the game was in a bad state before they launched it, yet they launched it anyway. I don't think there is any way that they did not see this all months off. I think it's surprising that they didn't delay the game, but that could be down to their publishing wing not budging, or to other commitments. But the point still does stand. They were willing to sell something to people that they knew was not in a good state, and they were willing to do that for quite a lot of real money. Todd saying 76 just isn't a Metacritic game, to me, that doesn't hold water. I think there's a lot of revisionism and reframing going on here. saying that it's not a Metacritic game, describing the problems as bumps, the total commitment to a vision that we won't see for a year. It all just is a bit odd, and I think a lot of this just boils down to kind of corporate video game communications. It's kind of what they're like, and that weird thing where there's the trouble of making a bit of software. There's all of those legitimate things, like if you see a bunch of devs in a bar, they might be talking in language more similar to Todd. They're like, oh yeah, you know, we were working and shipping this product, we had a whole bunch of bugs, oh, it was so annoying, blah, blah, blah. But you know what, we finally got over that. Or it's a bit like if you're at work and there's a project at work that, got off to a really bad start, but, you go to talk about it after the fact and everyone feels a bit better about it, even though the original customer for that project might have felt quite burnt at the time. I think a good deal of this is just a matter of perspective, but it is in this kind of odd world where we're seeing software development and the consumer side of things really sort of clash together. And especially with Fallout 76, it's an instance where the product was in many ways so broken that the seams really did show, and you could just see, oh, this is just a bit of faulty software. It's not a video game experience. That's kind of how it felt at launch. And I suppose to me, that's just a continually interesting part of how we analyze and deal with this industry, because knowing some at least of the dev side, it is truly bloody difficult. But yeah, I suppose this is like Todd in marketing mode. Even though a lot of the things that he's saying, they do sound more like insider talk. The way devs on Project A will be talking to devs on Project B when they're in a bar after work, talking about, our bumps and all of that stuff. And then, when a customer actually hears that, the customer's thinking, hang on a second, they were not merely bumps. That was the weekend that I had planned ruined, or the 2 days that I booked off work to enjoy this game ruined, or whatever. So yeah, it's all just a matter of perspectives and studying incentives, and it's super bloody interesting. So let me know what you think about all of this down below, especially just the communication side of things, how developers and publishers and customers talk to each other. I think, to me, that's the most interesting thing here. So let me know what you think. Thank you very much for watching. Be sure to check out today's other video, and with that, I will see you next time.